A seminary classmate of mine told me this story about his home church, and he swore that it was true. I think many years ago shared this story, but every time Ascension Sunday comes, I think of it. Now, his church, his home church in a small town, was not a large one, not one with a lot of resources, but they were a talented church, very committed to sharing and witnessing the good news of God's love with their community. And so one year, they decided they were going to put on a passion play about the last days of Jesus' life, his resurrection, and even his ascension into heaven. And they had several members who were rather talented, connected to the local community theater and even the community college in the town, in the community college drama department. So they thought this was a gift they could offer their small town and organize this big passion play to be celebrated Holy Week. So the church had auditions for the passion play in the community. The role of Jesus was given to a local college student, I think primarily because he had a beard. The pastor was to play Judas Iscariot, and he swore that wasn't typecasting. And they had weeks of rehearsals and all ages and all the members and people participating either as actors or helping with the props and scenery. And they were particularly excited for the final scene of Ascension because they had been able to secure, and maybe those of you in theater have heard of this, secure what is called a Peter Pan apparatus, where a harness is attached to the actor and through a system of pulleys and weighted sandbags, was able to just simply lift their heels and gently rise up into the sky. All the actor had to do was simply that. And the night of the performance arrived, and the church was so excited, they had a full house from the community, local community theater. And the play began flawlessly as they went through the last events of last days of Jesus' life, the gathering at the Lord's Supper, the prayers in the Garden of Gethsemane, his arrest, even his carrying the cross to Golgotha. There was not a dry eye in the theater. And everything was going perfectly until they got to the scene where the Roman soldier stabs Jesus on the cross with a spear. The soldier, played by an older youth from the youth group, had not realized that when they attached the rubber part of the spear to the shaft with some glue, that the glue had actually hardened the spear. So when the young man, eagerly playing his part, thrusts the spear into Jesus' side, the audience could hear Jesus cry out, "My God, I've been stabbed." He swore this was true. Realizing something was wrong, the director asked for the curtain to come down. They rushed to a bleeding Jesus, and Jesus went to the hospital for a few stitches. Was fine. And after a few minutes of this chaos, they were surprised to discover the audience was waiting rather patiently for the play to go on. After all, Jesus could have cried out he was stabbed. The audience thought it was part of the play. So, the play must go on. The director hurriedly got Jesus' understudy, another high school kid from the youth group, didn't have a beard, but still would work, ready for the final resurrection scenes and especially for that ascension scene that would end the play. And what they had not realized, what they had not thought about in the chaos of the moment, was that the understudy for Jesus weighed about 20 pounds less than the original Jesus. My friend swore this was true. So when that final ascension scene arrived, Jesus stood before the disciples, told them he would return to go baptize, proclaim and witness the news. He lifted his heels and was yanked up in the air. What the audience saw was Jesus rising up so fast and disappearing into the rafters and hearing a big thump and 2 sandals falling silently to the stage. Somehow, it was a disaster. But despite the disaster, the ineffectiveness of that human witness of the church, somehow God's grace shines through, even if it's just 2 sandals falling gently to a stage. The audience gave a standing ovation. So I think of that story every time I think about the story of ascension, of Jesus' ascension, and it reminds me of this truth I know, having served the church for over 30 years, of the bumbling, stumbling efforts of the church. And we still manage somehow to witness, despite our bumbling and stumbling and failures and brokenness, to witness to the good news of Jesus Christ. That despite the disasters, despite the ineffectiveness of our human witness as a church, somehow God's grace shines through, even if it's just 2 sandals falling on a stage. And I, particularly this week, struggled with what it means to be the church this week. To witness to God's love in the face of the horrors of another mass shooting, this one among those innocent children of Uvalde. And amidst my own feelings of sadness and of anger and grief and lamentation, I struggle. I struggle what it means in this world, what it means to be a witness that Jesus calls us to today. As he called those disciples so many years ago, on that day he ascended into heaven. And how I think and reflect how the church, I cannot help but feel the world is broken, but how even the church has failed, stumbled and bumbled its way along to witness to Christ in this world. And I feel like those disciples in our story as they see Jesus arise and ascend to heaven, and I want to ask the very question that they asked him. Lord, will your kingdom be a reality? When's it happening? When, Lord, will your kingdom be a reality when the guns are beaten into plowshares, right? When, Lord, will your kingdom be a reality where there are no more tears and no more mothers crying out with grief and pain? Lord, when will your kingdom be a reality where peace and justice and all who suffer and hurt will find solace? When, Lord? When? It's the very same question I have myself. And they ask him, Jesus, when will you return? When will you return to fix all this? And Jesus says, y'all don't really understand. You see, something is coming. Someone is coming. It's unpredictable. Who's going to change everything despite your bumbling failures. The Spirit is coming to transform you into an instrument, a witness of God's kingdom, to be the change that creates a world where children do not have to go to school in fear, or the Spirit will come to change a world and create it where mothers and fathers don't have to fearfully watch their children go off to school, that the Spirit will come to change and transform a world where teachers don't have to be afraid to go teach. And it's like those two men in white robes. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but there's actually the story of Easter Sunday morning that Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb and she discovers two men wearing white robes, which kind of evokes this image of resurrection. But they're up there looking in heaven. Why? They are looking up to the sky as Jesus has arisen. And these two men in white robes say, "What are you looking to the heavens for?" Look to each other. You're the ones empowered to make God's kingdom a reality. You're the ones who will advocate for common sense gun laws. You're the ones who will seek resources for the community, for the mentally ill in our community. You're the ones who will seek to create communities so that those who are lost and lonely and so afraid will know they are loved and known. In other words, don't look to the heavens. Don't look there. Look at each other. And the Spirit will give you the courage and the strength and the heart to make God's kingdom a reality. Now, it strikes me that when the disciples hear this news and as Jesus rises up, here's the news of this arrival, soon coming, of the Holy Spirit. They return to Jerusalem and they gather in a house to pray. Now, this isn't simply thoughts and prayers that we often hear these days. It's a form of inaction. No, they gather to pray and prepare to make a difference in the world. That's why they pray. This prayer is a form of action to get ready and to be ready when the Spirit arrives and leads them. And I always thought it was an odd detail in the story that Luke specifically names them, doesn't he? He says, this is Peter, this is Bartholomew, this is this disciple, as if to say, these are the very people who bumbled and stumbled their way through Holy Week, right? Who betrayed Jesus. These are the very people, Peter denied Jesus. The very people who failed, and yet they will be the very community which will witness and change the world. And so as we're gathered here this morning, I could name each of you disciples, Jude or Amgad or Mark or Paul, as you pray this morning that you are being called to look and seek that Spirit to change the world. To God be the glory this day, forevermore. Amen.